Tonight I'm doing the Conspiracy Debunker with Scott Horton. Thank you. I'm going to throw some of 2025's biggest conspiracies at Scott, and we're going to get the actual scoop on what's going on there. Before we do, and I know that we just did a comedy show, but Scott is the leading authority on some of these topics. So before we get into the conspiracies, I would like to get some actual information, and I'd love to hear your predictions for...
I blame Netanyahu. Oh, wait.
Oh.
What was the quick?
I go more global just with the Jews. That's the way I like to approach it, but I'm allowed to say those
You have
things.
a license.
Let me just lower this a little bit. So let's go with war predictions for, through the end of the year, maybe leading into next year. What do you think is going to end up happening in Ukraine? Do you think we have a permanent military do you think it's going to be do you think Trump is actually going to get peace over in the Ukraine, and do you think he's going to pull off a deal with the Iranians? What are your predictions for Iran and Ukraine, Russia for the next 6 months?
I am bearish on Ukraine and bullish on Iran.
And by bearish, you mean you think he's going to get us out of that war, but he's going to get us into the Iran war?
No, strike that, reverse it. Well, or not exactly, but I think he's going to probably just have to give up on solving the issue in Ukraine outstanding. I think that war is, I do believe that Trump is sincere about wanting to end it and trying to do what he can to end it, but it's just that his side, the Western side and the Ukrainian side, are just in a position of weakness here. The Russians, essentially all the momentum is with them, and yet their strategy has been to essentially move very slowly and just grind up the Ukrainian military. But that means that they're still very far short of their territorial goals. They've claimed to have annexed these entire 4 provinces, but they only occupy all of one of them, and not exactly all of it, but Luhansk is virtually all under their control. But the other 3 provinces that they've claimed to annex are still not. So their demands are that the Ukrainians have to withdraw from territory that they still occupy, which they're not going to do. On the other hand, they're still going to lose. It's just the question of when and how long. And the Germans and the French are still promising to keep financial and military support going, so they don't want to quit. And if you look at Vietnam or Afghanistan, as soon as we lose and leave, the government falls, right? In this case, we've supported them, but it hasn't been American actual military on the ground fighting the thing for them. So it's not that same situation. So even if Trump really did completely cut them off, they can still keep fighting, I think, for quite a while, and they want to. And certainly,
how much manpower do they have to keep going?
I don't know. The people who predicted that they were going to run out of men any day now have been wrong for 3 years straight. So I just don't know the depth of their reserves, the depth of their conscription. I mean, there's still millions of people live in the country. See, this is something that's actually really crucial to the war, and it's counterintuitive at first. People are surprised to find this out. You see pictures of older guys in their 40s and 50s out fighting on the front lines. And the initial reaction is, oh my God, they already ran out of young men. But that's actually not right. In fact, the policy has been, the draft age has been 27. They only recently lowered it to 25. And the people, so we're talking 25 to 30-year-olds, these are considered young men. They're kept in reserve in the rear doing logistics and supply and stuff, because they're trying desperately to spare their lives. And they're sending the 45 and 50-year-old guys out to the front under the theory that they've already had children and their lives are therefore more expendable, whereas the younger men haven't had a chance to reproduce yet. And they have this terrible population crisis in the country. So then you have Lindsey Graham representing the American War Party go over there. And it's kind of perfect, right? Like if this was a TV show or something, he pitches his little sissy fit over it and says, I can't believe that you're not lowering the conscription age to 18, and I can't believe that you're not sending your 18-year-olds to the front. How in the hell do you expect to win this war if you're not going to commit the youth to the front? But the thing is, they've done the balance, and they said, we just can't afford to send our youth out to get ground up in this thing, because then we're not going to have a society worth defending at all. We're going to be extinct. We already have so many people have fled the country, And so we have to save our reproduction age males. That's their demographic crisis that they're in. And the Americans are like, get out there. Because the Americans clearly have, they've demonstrated and they've said explicitly over and over again that the Ukrainian soldiers here are just extras in their movie. They don't care at all. This is about making Russian soldiers die while American soldiers don't die. Yeah, we're spending money, but our soldiers aren't being killed, but theirs are, so it's costing them, so we're inflicting a strategic defeat on them. And they'll say it over and over again. They'll use the same phrase, we're getting so much bang for our buck here, because we're sending Russians home in coffins. And then they'll stop. They don't even mention the Ukrainians getting chewed up in this thing, because they don't give a damn about them. And so when the war is over and Ukraine loses and the right-wing Nazis that take over the regime, like this guy Andriy Beletsky is the leader of the 3rd Infantry Division, or their version of this, the 3rd Separate Infantry Division, their special whatever attachment. He's making himself a war hero on the front line of this thing the whole time. People like him are going to be the new leaders of Ukraine in the next generation. And their stab in the back theory about how the West promised them everything and got them into this trouble and lost them a third of their country is going to be true. And then we're going to suffer the blowback from that, just like we always do.
So I got to ask, it seems like a pretty decent offer is on the table to Putin. Not that I'm saying that Zelensky has 100% agreed to this, but it seems that essentially the offer on the table is you can keep the territories that you already conquered, and we gotta call it a war here. Now
they're not going to do it, dude. They're not going to do it.
So now that's what I got to ask, because at the start of the war there was all that talk of Putin's trying to take all of Russia. It's got nothing to do with NATO. He's always wanted to take he always wanted to march forward and do the Soviet Union thing again. So is Putin going to make us look like a bunch of assholes where he conquered good territories, it's got good minerals, and he's like, why don't I keep on going? Or like, does Putin not actually want out of this war? It seems like it's a good offer. Take the territories that you won, and we'll be done with it, and you can reopen, get back onto the global stage. But
well, that's what I was just saying. He hasn't won them yet. He controls virtually all of Luhansk, only like 95% of it, but like virtually all of Luhansk. But he controls, and I'm sorry because I don't know the exact percentages, but he controls something like 2/3 of Donetsk and Zaporozhye and Kherson. Only half of Kherson. Half of Kherson's the other side of the river. So, and he controls probably half of Zaporozhye.
So why hasn't he pushed forward more? It's just the siege mentality, or he can't grab these territories?
Well, I mean, I'm just not a real military expert on this. My favorite ones, Daniel Davis. I've had profound respect for him since he was the great heroic whistleblower on the Afghan war back in 2012, and he's a great military analyst. And there's a bunch of others, and they just say that the Russian strategy has been to move slow to spare their guys because they have the advantage in artillery and in air power. And since they're on the offensive, typically the advancing, aggressing army loses men in a much higher ratio than the defenders. And the solution to that is just rain down artillery on them. And then they found, they have these huge storehouses of old Soviet dumb bombs that were made back in the 60s and 70s. And they got new glide kits, essentially the Russian version of the JDAM kit, which is essentially makes an old dumb bomb that, Khrushchev paid 60 rubles for, however generations ago, into a brand new sophisticated weapon at a very reasonable price. And so they're just bombing the crap out of them and taking their time moving forward. So in other words, this is what I was trying to say before, is Trump is sincere, but he just got inaugurated for the beginning of his second term at a very disadvantageous time to achieving a deal here. Because the Russians are winning, but they're short of their goal. So no, Mr. Trump, we're not going to stop, is essentially their position.
And what is their goal? Is it all of Ukraine?
It's as I said, they already claimed these 4 territories. They've officially annexed them. And by the way, this was not the demand at the beginning of the war. The demand at the beginning of the war was they were even at one point willing to relinquish their control over the Donbass as long as they could get full guarantees of protection. No, I guess that wasn't right. They are still demanding the Donbass, but they were going to guarantee the rest and peace as long as the rights of ethnic Russians were respected in the remaining territories. America and Ukraine both promised never to bring them into NATO, and promised never to install the missiles and the other few conditions. But then what happened was in September, is actually the weekend of September 11th, 2022, the Ukrainians had their best week. And essentially they did this feint where they convinced the Russians that they were going to move in Kherson. And so the Russians moved a bunch of forces down to Kherson and left Kharkiv wide open. And so, which they never controlled Kharkiv city, but they controlled much of the countryside there. And the Ukrainians advanced and kicked them all the way out of Kharkiv into Luhansk. And then at the same time, then they made a second feint and had some success in pushing the Russians across the river down in Kherson. So it was a real success. They really had advanced and pushed the Russians back in two major places. But everybody who was being honest about it knew at the time this is as good as it's going to get. And in fact, it was worse, because the Russians' reaction was, oh yeah, well then we hereby annex Zaporozhye and Kherson entirely. And then they passed a law, and Putin signed it, right? They have officially made these territories part of the Russian Federation, though they still don't control them. And so my thing is, if Daniel Davis is right, that the Russian policy is just to chew up the Ukrainian forces until one day they just break and the Russians have their way and can walk around and go wherever they want, then the question is, are they going to go ahead and go back to Kharkiv and say, actually, you know what? Before we were happy with 4 provinces, now we want 6. In fact, maybe now we want Sumy, and now we want Odessa. And now we want to go ahead. I don't know if you guys know about the geography here, but there's this little strip of land controlled by Russia called Transnistria that's on the Moldovan side of the river, on the Moldovan-Ukrainian border. And this was like a vacation destination for Russian Soviet officials back in the old days, and there's still a bunch of them left under Russian protection. So you can see from the Russian hawks' point of view, and the Russian hawks in the media, they do talk about this, that, well, geez, at this point, what are we going to do? You know, Odessa and Kharkiv, these are historically Russian cities, after all. And geez, shouldn't we go all the way and protect our brethren in Transnistria and make sure that we can by building the land bridge all the way across the entire Ukrainian coast? And after all, and this is the logic of government programs, right? Once Putin invades the country and he removes the entire Russian population out of the country by drawing a new Russian border around them, well, that means there are no more pro-Russians left in Ukraine. They used to win elections. That's why America had to overthrow the government there every few years. But now they're never going to win elections again. Now it's going to be the far Ukrainian nationalist right from the far west of the country are going to dominate. And so then that means any ethnic, or at least, Russian-speaking, culturally Russian people in the eastern half of the country, well, geez, you don't expect us to now leave them in such an inferior, even worse minority position than before without our protection. So now we have to keep going. Same thing for, it's a great excuse, but this is how all government programs work, is they create a crisis and then they realize, oh, geez, I created some more crises. But you know what I could do? I could just keep going. And then hopefully that'll account for it.
And are the territories lucrative enough that it's like worth it for Putin to be conquering them versus, continued sanctions and all the other shenanigans that come with it?
I mean, I don't know. So this is the thing. Trump really doesn't have any sticks, right? He's losing the war. I mean, his side, America's, client here. All he has to offer is carrots, but they're really great ones. Like, we could drop all the sanctions, and this is what he's proposed. We'll drop all the sanctions going back to 2014.
Keep what you conquered.
Keep what you took so far, and we'll normalize relations and be friends again, which, I don't know if y'all are the praying types, but somebody tell Jesus to tell Putin to just sign the damn thing. That should be worth it. One last big chance for Russia to move west, to be part of Europe and not just turn all the way east. And it's Joe Biden who kicked him out of Europe. Fine. But now from the Russians' point of view, can they trust that? Is Chelsea Clinton going to be the president in another 3.5 years from now? And then she's just going to take back everything that Trump does? I mean, I think, so the answer to that is, if Trump is serious, then go big as hell and tell him, listen, man, let's do this. And then 1 week later, you got my swear, we're going to sign a new nuclear treaty too. We're going to revive START 2. We're going to get back on the INF. We're going to bring in the Chinese. We're going to do something huge on military cutbacks and especially on nuclear weapons. And then this is how, essentially, to shove it down the liberals' throat. Are you guys really going to oppose a new nuclear weapons treaty with Russia? I mean, this is what would Ronald Reagan do? He would sign the damn thing. That's the truth of it. And it's just, it makes, and hell, even Bill Clinton would. So,
all right, so let's, so in other words, prediction for Russia is that Putin got his taste of war and now he's just going to keep on going and he's got no real reason to stop. Now let's move over to, is that a fair summary?
I think he's got good reason to stop, and I hope he would, but being warming back up with the United States and normalizing relations with the United States, I fear that that's not going to be enough.
Because he doesn't trust that if Donald Trump puts together a deal, that a new administration won't come in and basically go back to demonizing Russia, and then he missed his opportunity to continue taking over Ukraine.
And you know, like, I think I complained at the time too. When they passed the law saying Zaporozhye and Kherson and all this are all officially Russian territories, it's like, man, that's really throwing your hat over the fence. You know what I mean? In a Stand By Me kind of way. Like, you have to go now, dude. This is, you know. So here we are years later. He has a great chance to save face and end the war, but now he can't. Because now he drew the line 700 miles that way, and he ain't, or whatever.
All right, so let's move over to Iran.
Okay.
So, you know, sometimes, I guess the snapshot would be, it seems like Donald Trump would like to get us back into the Obama deal that he ripped up.
Yeah.
And the Israelis would really like to go pick a fight and then have us get our back. The joke I made on Run Your Mouth was, you know, because the Israel propaganda is at this point is that it's the 11th hour, and if we just take it out, then, you know, they'll be peaceful and cool. And if we don't do it now, we'll never do it again. And I'm like, if that's true, then go do it. But then if it turns out not to be true and you're the crazy girlfriend that got us into a fight, it's time for a breakup. That's kind of my snapshot, but it seems like Israel really wants to go have this war, and Donald Trump's like, I don't really want to have this war. So what's your prediction on how it plays out?
Well, I mean, it all comes down to how hard Trump is going to stick to his essentially deal-killing demand, poison pill demand that Iran cease all uranium enrichment. They're never going to do that. They're never. That's their
Why
nuclear
do they want?
deterrent.
Okay, if they don't actually want to build nukes, they got so much oil there. Why do they like? What is their rationale for why they need nuclear? Because they try and pretend, hey, this is not nukes. We just want to be have nuclear energy. But
well, I think that's mostly true, right? I mean, they have a natural supply of uranium in their country, so they want to mine that, refine it, and run their electricity program on that and sell their oil on the market. Now, at the same time, and I think more importantly, is it's a latent nuclear deterrent, right?
You mean that there will always be a breakout period, so even if they don't currently have a nuke, don't go to war with them because they're always a year away from being able to arm up.
And because a war with them would not guarantee a successful regime change, and then they'll just build a new facility under a darker, deeper mountain complex, and they'll build a nuke then. So this is really the stand-up. So first of all, on the latent nuclear deterrent, this is the same as Brazil, Japan, and Germany, where they have proven that they have mastered the fuel cycle. They have civilian nuclear programs. They're inspected and safeguarded and declared and whatever. And everybody knows they can make a nuke. So for like example in Japan, they've got an anti-nuke culture since they got nuked. And they have a bigger already thermonuclear armed power in China next door. Hey, those people are in a real hurry. I know exactly how they feel. But China's not threatening them. So essentially their diplomatic body language to China here is, look, just don't threaten me. And then I won't make nukes, and then we won't have a contest about who's going to nuke who and how quickly one could out-nuke the other. Let's just not even do that. You guys already have the advantage. But let's not have a problem, and then we won't have a problem. Right. That's essentially the same attitude that the Iranians have. So, I could make a nuke. Don't put me in the position where I feel like I have to. And then the American thing is, we promised Israel that we threaten you. You better not make a nuke. And then they go, okay, just don't bomb me and I won't. And then we go, you better not. And they go, okay. So in other words, we got this standoff where actually we're already in agreement. So this is why I say I think an agreement should be easy. That's why I say I'm bullish on the thing, is because the Ayatollah doesn't want to fight. After all, if he does break out and start to make a nuke, we're going to goddamn bomb him, right? Really bad. And then he'll make a nuke anyway after we bomb the crap out of him, and maybe even with nukes to get at his deeper facilities. And so he doesn't want that. So this is why it was easy for Obama to have a deal. They were already in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They already had a safeguards agreement with the IAEA. They were already not making nuclear weapons. They're a threshold state, and that's it. So you're right. The obvious thing is to figure out a way to rename the Obama deal the Trump deal, rearrange some paragraphs, and make it, get the Iranians to agree to a few more sunset provisions, to lift those and make some of their agreements permanent, and then get back into it. And after all, this is the thing about Trump. When Trump, or not the thing about him, but the thing about what he did, when he tore up the Obama deal in 2018, he didn't really tear it up. He just withdrew America from it, right? Like the Paris climate thing is still a thing. It's just we weren't part of it anymore. So did he re-get us out of that? But anyway, but the point being that they're still in the agreement with all the rest of the UN Security Council. It's still an active treaty, considered by all of them. And so even the parts where the Iranians aren't abiding by the restrictions in it, that's actually allowed in the deal. That if America breaks the deal, then they can stop abiding by some of the restrictions in it without actually breaking the deal and leaving the deal itself, which is where we are right now. So it's kind of awkward for Trump to figure out how to get us back in there when he said it was the worst deal that anyone ever signed and blah, 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 blah. But it's the deal that we already have and that already accomplishes everything that he wants, which is guaranteeing the civilian nature of their program.
Is Iran currently a year away, or what is the actual breakout period?
Well, so this is interesting. So the way that they categorize a breakout period is how long would it take them to enrich enough uranium to weapons grade to make a single atom bomb out of it. But they don't include the amount of time that it would take to have the metallurgists form it into the right shape and have the bomb makers fit it into a delivery vehicle and this and that and whatever. All of that adds time. So they say that under the deal it was, and see, part of the deal was they can enrich uranium, but everything that they do, they have to ship out of the country to France, and then the French turn it into fuel rods and then ship it back. And that was the compromise, that you can keep enriching uranium, but you can't have a stockpile of it. And that way to reduce, or that way to lengthen the amount of time that it would take for them to make a bomb if they decided to make one. Is that clear? So now they have a much bigger stockpile of highly enriched uranium, not weapons grade, but 60%, which could very easily be enriched weapons grade. They've only done so they can negotiate it away, though. So it's okay. It's not that they're making weapons grade shit, though.
So in your summation, essentially, they want to have the risk of that they could break out so that if someone attacked them, they're within a period that they could have the nuke and a nuclear deterrent.
Well, and so one more thing about that is, so when we talk about enriched uranium to weapons grade, then what we're really talking about them making, or the potential of them making, is what would be the Hiroshima bomb, which is a simple gun-type nuke, which is a giant thing. And what it essentially is it's a shotgun inside that shoots a gigantic, slug, basically, of highly enriched uranium into a target of highly enriched uranium. And that's what creates the critical mass and the fission reaction there. So the problem with that is that they don't have heavy bombers. They have no ability to deliver that thing except on the back of a flatbed truck or something, right? So if you want to miniaturize a nuclear bomb, then that's like what you have with the Nagasaki bomb, which itself was not that small, but I'm just saying the process there was an implosion system with a plutonium pit. So this is how virtually everyone, including the United States and our arsenal, and I believe all the other arsenals in the world, where they have missiles tipped with nuclear bombs in missile-sized delivery vehicles and warheads. These are plutonium implosion bombs that you're able to, what they call, miniaturize to stick onto the tip of a missile. You can't do that with uranium. Or you can, potentially you could, but it'd be much more difficult and mostly unheard of to do so. But here's the thing, is they don't have any plutonium, And the thing is, the way that you get plutonium for nuclear weapons is you burn uranium in your nuclear reactor, and then you have plutonium waste. But the waste comes out all polluted with other isotopes. You can't use it for weapons unless you have a whole other facility to reprocess that plutonium, to purify it, to make nuclear weapons fuel out of it. Well, they don't have a facility like that at all. And their process for once their reactors full of enough plutonium waste under the deal, the Russians come and get it and take all the plutonium waste out. And so they do not have a plutonium route to the bomb at all. And their uranium route to the bomb is a route to a gigantic bomb that they can't really do anything with other than test one in the desert and say, don't mess with me. You know, they could maybe drive one to Baghdad, but how are they going to get it across the Jordan River? You know what I mean?
So
They're
you're
not.
saying the Obama deal basically completely neutralized the threat of an offensive Iranian nuclear attack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and one more thing about
Yeah.
that is even Netanyahu himself said that he doesn't fear. This is such hype, and you'll hear people say this, that, oh, the Ayatollah wants to die to force the 12th Imam to come back. He doesn't care if Israel nukes all of Iran off the face of the earth as long as he can shoot one nuke at Israel. Somebody said that to me recently in a debate. But yeah, that's completely ridiculous.
All right, so just on the last thing on the Iran thing, and then we'll delve into some conspiracies. So I guess I
was going to say, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I lost my train of thought, but Netanyahu himself said that was bullshit, and that that's for the rubes to believe. But in fact, his concern was that there would be a brain drain in Israel where talented young Israelis would just move to Miami instead of staying there. And that would be an existential threat to Israel good enough for your son to die in the next war. How do you like that?
wait, because if Iran
had a nuclear capability, young talented Israelis who have options, right, might just think, geez, maybe I'll live a little further away from Iran. You know? And why if Israel's supposed to be a safe haven, I guess if Iran had nukes, it would be less of one. And then, so they just feared that this is what they called it, the brain drain. And by the way, this is what Netanyahu and Ehud Barak, who was then his partner and defense minister, told Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic, who's their agent, former prison guard of the Palestinians and ruthless enforcer of who's allowed to be a journalist in America from The Atlantic magazine.
So even amongst the Israeli elites, they don't actually view that Iran is some 1,000-year empire and they're on a different timetable. And
That's
they're just
all
looking.
bullshit.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So speaking of bullshit,
Are you surprised?
speaking of bullshit, let's delve into some conspiracies we'll just go down some of the big ones that make its waves online, and we'll get the Scott Horton debunking or affirmation. So let's start with 9/11. Inside job. Was it a chemical explosion from the inside? Was it to remove paperwork from the Fed? Was it the Jews wanted us to go fight Iraq and Iran? What do you think is the actual 9/11 storyline?
Well, like you guys already know, Ron Paul's always right. And I'm a Ron Paul guy on this one. I always get myself in such trouble with this stuff. The thing is I was a kook on 9/11 before it happened. And I had predicted it for years. To anybody who would listen to me in my cab, and even people who would not, and all my friends and family and everything, they're going to hit New York. Al-Qaeda is just a front for the CIA and just over simple, you know? And then what happened was when it happened at the time, I didn't have a radio show. I had no interest in performing any of this stuff for anybody, and I had time to
You just wanted to smoke weed and yell at strangers.
Yeah, and I just had a regular job. And even then, I guess I just had more time to just take my time and read as much as I could. And of course, everybody knows that the International Islamic Brigades were essentially raised up by the United States and Saudi Arabia to fight in Afghanistan in the 80s. In fact, they did some hits against some dictators in Africa in the late 70s as well. But the main thing was Afghanistan in the 80s, and then they went on from there to Bosnia, Kosovo, and Chechnya with various degrees of American and British and Saudi support for them all along. And all through the 90s, they were attacking us. And I think, people a lot of times, they base their 9/11 trutherism on the idea that, one, the thing just came out of the clear blue sky, just like in the actual footage on TV. The plane comes out of the clear blue sky. It's a pretty, harsh visual cliche to, have instilled in your brain. And then the other thing was they immediately conflated and pretended that al-Qaeda and the Taliban were the same thing. So now we weren't attacked by wealthy, highly educated, sophisticated international terrorists who were hiding in Afghanistan. We were attacked by a bunch of illiterate cavemen hillbillies from the town of Pashtunistan, Bedrock, down in the Helmand province. And they hate us because of how free we are. And people were just like, that is such bullshit. They knew that couldn't be right. And of course, that was such a ridiculous oversimplification. But on the first thing, they'd been attacking us here since 1990. First, they killed Rabbi Kahane in New York in 1990, and he was a horrible right-wing. His Koch party was banned by the Israeli Supreme Court for being fascist, and his idea was to cleanse the entire West Bank and Gaza Strip of all the Palestinians. Sound familiar? Take all that territory. This is mainstream public opinion and political opinion in Israel now, and they're acting like it. But so he was the first one. And then in 1992, they killed some American, I don't know if they were CIA or military, at a Radisson hotel in Yemen. And then in 1993, they blew up the World Trade Center. And yes, the FBI could have stopped that, but it wasn't that they did it and wanted it to happen. What happened was there was a walk-in informant who had put himself in the position of cooking a fake bomb for the plot. If they would only pay him $500 a week and let him infiltrate this group. He was an Egyptian army intelligence officer named Ahmed Salam. And then essentially what happened was the agents working the case were doing a good job, but their boss, his name was Carson Dunbar, was just not interested in all this Arab bullshit and essentially refused to pay the guy his $500 and tried to insist that he wear a wire when the guy's sleeping in his pajamas on the floor of the mosque with all of these guys. You can't wear a wire. And so he ended up like cutting him off. And the guy ended up telling the other conspirators, I think the FBI's on to me. And so he left the group. Then they brought in Ramzi Youssef, who cooked the truck bomb that almost tipped one tower over into the other, which would have hit another 2 or 3 towers too, broken from the bottom and tipped over. And we could have killed 20,000 people or God knows how many people. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But only 6 people died, and the ATF raided the Branch Davidians 2 days later. And it was Bill Clinton's first 100 days, and it just was erased from public imagination, from any real, public imagination. In 1995, they killed Americans who were training Saudi National Guard. This is bin Laden's group, essentially. Killed Americans training the Saudi National Guard. And also in 1995, Ramzi Youssef, who cooked the bomb for the World Trade Center, he had escaped and fled to the Philippines. His buddies got busted, and there was a fire. They were making explosives in their apartment, and there was a fire, and they fled. But he sent his guys back, and they got arrested, and the cops got the laptop. And on the laptop was a plan to kill Bill Clinton, hold your applause, and Pope John Paul, and a plot to time bomb 12 planes over the Pacific Ocean. That was called Bojinka, and they did a test run that failed to blow up a plane but killed a Japanese businessman with a time bomb under his seat. And then the other plan was the planes operation, to hijack 10 planes and crash them into landmarks on America's east and west coast. And then on the 10th plane, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed would be on the microphone demanding that Israel withdraw from the occupied territories. And that was the plan, and they busted him, and they knew it. And Bojinka was the popular name for it because that was the time bomb plan. But the kamikaze attack against the United States was cooked up by Ramzi Youssef and his buddies Wali Khan, Amin Shah, and Abdul Hakim Murad there at that meeting in 1995. Then in 1996, Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed blew up the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, which was the barracks of American airmen whose job it was to bomb Iraq from these American bases to enforce the no-fly zones and the blockade against Iraq, which was number 1 on Osama bin Laden's list of complaints against the United States. And what did Bill Clinton and the FBI do? They blamed it on Iranian-backed Saudi Hezbollah, because there's this small Shiite minority in Saudi Arabia that happens to live on top of all the oil, and so the ruling family hates them and found this great opportunity to scapegoat them and let bin Laden get away with it. But ask yourself, why didn't Bill Clinton bomb Tehran then? Because he knew it was bullshit. They knew it was bullshit. They blamed it on this Iranian-backed group. But why would Iran do that? No reason. So never mind. But if they blamed it on, which was the truth at the time, hey, there are some serious right-wing, religious, kook, nationalist suicide bomber types in Saudi Arabia who want our combat forces the hell off of our soil. Look at who they targeted here. Can't we just bomb them from aircraft carriers in the Gulf? Why do we have to have combat forces with blonde women driving trucks around on holy Arabian soil? It's crazy to do this. Everybody knew it was crazy to do it, and they were doing it anyway, and that was why. And everybody knew that bin Laden did it. The chief of the CIA's bin Laden unit told me that himself, and bin Laden himself bragged about it to a British reporter named Abdel Bari Atwan, and said, "You're damn right we did it, and these are the names of the martyrs, and they're our heroes, and here's why," and all the rest. Then in 1998, they bombed the African embassies in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and Nairobi, Kenya. And then in the year 2000, they tried to bomb the USS the Sullivans, but the dinghy sank. But then they succeeded in their second try, and they hit the USS Cole and killed 17 sailors in Port Aden, Yemen. This was al-Qaeda that did this. This wasn't the CIA doing all this shit, blowing up all of our own guys all across the Middle East. These were the CIA's assets doing it. But we don't have to go so far to just say, oh yeah, that's because, Bill Clinton and John Deutsch and whatever the people running CIA at the time, that was what they wanted to happen to us. The thing is, these guys' job is supposed to be killing Russians and killing Serbs and killing Shiites. What do you mean they're going to attack America? And we know that the people in the government who were concerned about this were essentially ignored. And how do we know that? Because that's what they all say. They go, man, me and my colleagues, our hair was on fire, and we kept begging for a meeting, and no one would pay any attention. And what did the CIA guy, Michael Shorey, the chief of the CIA's bin Laden unit, this is what he said about the head of the FBI's counterterrorism unit. He goes, the only good thing that happened to America on September 11th is when that tower came down on John O'Neill's head. Right? That's the chief of the CIA's bin Laden unit. Wanted the head of the FBI's bin Laden unit dead. They were enemies. They hate each other. They got nothing but in each other's way. This guy locks up everything behind the grand jury where this guy can't get to it. Part of CIA is still backing these guys in Chechnya. Part of CIA, as we know, they had the rendition program. That wasn't Bush that invented that. That was in the Clinton years, where the most dangerous of these anti-American bin Ladenites would get kidnapped and sent to Egypt to be tortured and murdered. They did it, sent them to... Robert Baer said, if you want an interrogation, you send them to Jordan. You want them tortured, you send them to Syria. You want them to disappear forever, you send them to Egypt. And he was talking about the Clinton years. So these are America's enemies. And then let me explain real quick and I'll stop. First of all, the motive, as I mentioned, the first motive, their major reason for targeting the United States was occupying the Arabian Peninsula in order to bomb and blockade Iraq. And then was support for Israel and their merciless persecution of the Palestinians and, at that time, of the Lebanese. And importantly, when Shimon Peres invaded southern Lebanon, re-invaded in 1996, get this, I love this just trivia shit. It was Naftali Bennett was the once and again future probably prime minister of Israel. He was the guy that called in the artillery strike on a UN shelter full of 106 women and children and killed them all. And bin Laden ranted about this in his first declaration of war against the US in 1996. And Mohammed Atta, who ended up becoming the lead hijacker, and his buddy Ramzi bin al-Shibh, who helped coordinate the thing, they read that and they said, yes, we're joining. This is what we want to do. And that was over killing Shiites, by the way, but they were pissed enough that here's some Egyptian engineering students studying in Hamburg, Germany, want to volunteer for a Saudi to kill Americans to get revenge for what Israel is doing in Lebanon. And then, so what do? They go, no, the Taliban hates us for our freedom. Right, and then so everybody goes, no, it must have just been an inside job.
Let me ask you this. So this kind of, the overarching story here is essentially the CIA is both empowering these people while pissing them off at the same time.
Right.
But then you look at, what happened with the terror wars and Building 7.
Oh, God.
So I'm curious. So, that seems like more than just operational failure of two different departments of the CIA with different agendas and creating a mess. So what do you, what is the Scott Horton explanation for Building 7?
Well, I mean, first of all, on the whole terror war thing, of course they're going to exploit it. That was the point. The point of the attack, the action is in the reaction of the opposition. It's asymmetric war. So
I mean,
so in other words,
that's
QE
what
bono.
Bin Laden's looking to pull us into the
right.
wars to bankrupt our country.
And you could say,
great plan.
You could say plan A would be to just make us say, wow, if this is the cost of imperialism in the Middle East, forget it. But he wasn't expecting that. The plan was, the actual expectation was that we would react and invade Afghanistan. This is exactly what he wanted to happen. And as his son later told Rolling Stone, that, you know, Clinton sent some cruise missiles and didn't get my dad. But then again, and this was in 2010, he goes, then again, you guys have been in Afghanistan for years and you still don't have him. Clinton was smart, not like the bull that runs after the red scarf. And he was repeating what his father had said. He said his father, he goes, when W. Bush was elected, my father was so happy. This is the kind of president he needs. One that will attack and spend money and break the country. This is what we helped them do to the Soviet Union, right? This is not that imaginative. They're just trying to recreate the exact same thing. Get us to invade Afghanistan, spend $10 trillion, leave in humiliation and weaken on the world stage where then they can have their own policy without us getting in their way.
Bin Laden's a genius, and he actually wants to bankrupt the country. So is Bush just a sucker, or were Bush and Cheney printing bills off of the military-industrial complex that they were actually looking for this to happen?
That's the joke. It's not that Bush was like an innocent. It's not that Bush was an innocent, like doe-eyed, you know, wonderful guy trying to do the right thing, but was just like, shucks, aw darn it, not quite up to the task. The point is, Bin Laden knew that he was a representative of corrupt corporate interests and imperialist, you know,
and so
schemers.
He would take the bait.
So he would take the bait,
right,
and he would exploit the September 11th attack and do something horrible, which is what he wanted. He was trying to, one, get us to go home. But if we wouldn't just go home, he was trying to force a cataclysm. He was trying to radicalize the entire region. You know, Scheuer said that when Bush went to Afghanistan, that was one thing. But then when he went to Iraq, he said that was the hoped for but unexpected gift to bin Laden. He said this makes America al-Qaeda's indispensable ally in the region. They have their agenda, but we accomplish it for them by knocking over these dictators and creating these battlefields, as we did in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, and in Yemen.
I want to hold your feet to the fire.
Okay, you can do the 7 thing. I'm happy to talk about that. But I'm just saying, it ain't a mystery why these guys did what they did.
No, so I understand why, but so what's this, like, I guess just 2-part question. Okay. Was our government willfully involved even if they just knew and looked the other way because they wanted to go ahead and be involved in all these wars?
Yeah.
And
so that's a good question.
And then part 2 is specifically the conspiracy theory that Building 7 was nothing hit it and it fell to the ground. And then I guess the other conspiracy theory of the Pentagon and all the security cameras that don't have footage and people that suspect that it was actually a missile.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll do the first question first, which I think is still a good question. I think it's an important question. And you know what? Like, man, like, you guys can tell the difference between good shit and kooky shit, right? Like, when fucking, you know that there's reams of government documents. We know that they censored 29 pages out of the congressional investigation, and they held it for years. And then when they released it, what was it about? It was about Saudi intelligence helping these guys every step of the way. Paying for their flight school, paying for their housing. They're living with Saudi intelligence officers in San Diego. All of these things. And so that raises a real question about why in the hell would Turki al-Faisal and Prince Bandar do that to us? These are our guys. These are not bin Ladenites. These might as well be American citizens. Turki and Bandar, they called Bandar Bush, right? So if you are just excited and you just are determined to jump to your conclusion and whatever, then that's a lot of fun and all that. But like, I think the honest answer is 2 parts. The first one is they've been backing these guys all along. And the deal is, yeah, you can have money, just don't attack the kingdom. They're mostly useful, as I said, in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Chechnya. And so if bin Ladenites are coming to the United States, they're going to flight school for a while, they're staying for a while, they're leaving again, whatever, then that's not necessarily helping them hijack planes and crash them into things unless you just assume that or you have direct evidence of that part of it, right? And because the thing is the Saudis do that for Saudi nationals in the country all the time. pay for their school, pay for their housing, all of these type of things. So unless you're just assuming your conclusion, if you're trying to be Occam's razor about the whole thing, like we don't really have a motive for Bandar to do this unless you skip ahead to, well, it's because Dick Cheney told him to. And he would have had to have had a go-ahead from Dick Cheney, right? There's no way in the world, there's no motive in the world for Prince Bandar to do this. The worst act of treachery you could imagine from an ally, unless it was such an inside job and they all absolutely
there's no
agree.
direct proof of
But
it.
I'm just saying, the thing is, like, I just don't think that Dick Cheney's got the balls for that, quite frankly. He's going to attack the Pentagon while his mentor, Donald Rumsfeld, is sitting in the thing. He's going to put his own White House at risk while he's sitting in it. He's going to commit, quite frankly, if you don't just assume your conclusion already and all cool people know it was such an inside job and all this shit, look at it quite honestly, nakedly here. Forget Building 7 and all this shit for a minute. But his friends in Saudi elite circles helping this thing happen somehow, in effect.
All right, so now I'll repeat the question.
Wait, does he really have the balls to commit what would be essentially the greatest act of treason in history? I don't think that he does.
So then
quite frankly, I don't. So I think there's a much more minimal explanation.
Yeah.
And you know what? So this goes, I'm going to do the Pentagon before Building 7 because this goes to essentially, you know, I don't want to piss too many people off, but hopefully no one will watch this.
It's run your mouth. You'll be all right.
But I listen.
There you go.
But listen, here's what it is. And I'm part of this. Like I said, I was a kook before 9/11. So I was a part of what was then like the post-Waco patriot movement, conspiracy theory movement in the country. And it was centered around the Access Channel here in town and what had been like Michigan militia radio on especially shortwave, but then low power FM repeaters and this kind of thing, and the internet. And we were right about Oklahoma City. Those of us, certainly the ones who blamed the Nazis. There were some who went off blaming the Arabs, but it was not the Arabs. It was the Nazis that did it and the cops that let them get away with it. Right about Gulf War illness. Right about Waco, you know, who started that fire. Right about the horror of bombing Iraq and all of that stuff. So the conspiracy theory movement of that time, it was there and it was healthy. And then on September 11th, every single leader of it just all jumped to the same conclusion at once because of course they did. The New World Order did it. I did too. The first thing I said was, how could you have 20 guys in the country and the FBI not know who every single one of them was and what they were doing, not following them around? Real ass al-Qaeda terrorists. It had to. We all assumed that immediately. Every one of us who was an Oklahoma bombing truther immediately said, I wonder if there were bombs inside the towers. But the thing is, instead of immediately assuming that, because like whatever, that's what we're all assuming together, how about actually look at what happens? And you see what happens is like an hour and a half after hour and a half after they're hit by jumbo jets going 600 miles an hour, the tops, the damaged portions give way to the extremely heavy tops above. Oh, it's going to do Flight 77. Remind me about the Pentagon. The tops begin to fall. And then the rest of the building falls under that. I guarantee you've never heard of 9/11 truthers say, well, I'm not saying you needed bombs to make the top begin to fall. I'm just saying you needed bombs to make the rest of the tower fall after the top. They never even break it down like that. It's going, the building fell from the bottom, or when it didn't. Or it just couldn't have done that. But the thing is, if you actually look at it, and they held this for a while, I don't know why, but I guess they don't just care about skeptics, but you can look at the police helicopter footage where the columns on the sides are just red hot, all of them, and completely, you know, wrecked too. You can see where they're failing, and you can see close up the moment of failure, where on one of the buildings anyway, at least, where it just goes, it just fails. And then once the top starts falling, it all comes undone. Now, I think a major part of that, and this is something that you'll never hear, you know, I do this a lot. Like, if you read my book, I bring up what they say the whole time so I can try to debunk it. You know what I mean? Try to steelman the argument the whole time. But I never hear the truth or steelman it. But if you were going to steelman the argument from my point of view about the towers, you would say, listen, I confess and concede that, yes, it's true. These buildings were built on a unique design. Unlike any skyscraper you've ever been in, they did not have steel reinforced concrete columns throughout the building. It was called the core skin model. They moved all the columns to the center and to the outside skin. That's why if you think of the World Trade Center, the windows are so skinny. It's because they kept the same number of columns. They just moved them all to the outside. And that meant then you had like a big square, what they called the donut, of just a concrete floor on each floor that was tied to the outside walls and tied to the inside thing. So when my old lady woke me up and said, yeah, planes hit the World Trade Center and then they fell down, I was like, nuh-uh, because I could picture the top begin to fall and then, like, I don't know, break apart and fall to the street, but the rest of the buildings stand. But then I got out there and I looked at it, and no, dude, that's not what happens. The tops start to fall, and the rest of the building just unravels from there. There's nothing to hold those floors up to resist. And you can see the outside walls, it just peels out like a goddamn banana.
You know
both
the
of them
I'm
do.
about to ask.
And so they both come down, and then this leads, of course, right to the next thing, which is that the North Tower hit Building 7. Building 7 was right across VC Street, which is about the width of me to you. It was this tiny street. And then Building 6, which is, a little bit wider than that, but not much. And this is a 120-story building. And when it came apart, it hit Building 7. And there are pictures you can find of the front of the building. And there's a huge scar down the top of the front. So the top joist that goes all the way across is severed. And then so are the first few floors, at least at the top. And then some of the rest is obscured by the smoke. You can't tell how far down exactly the damage goes, but it's quite a bit. And then there's also severe damage down at this corner, like if you're facing from the World Trade Center point of view at the front right corner there. And then the thing burned all day long. And so for 7 hours. And no one fought the fire because almost all the firefighters were dead, and the firefighters that weren't dead were digging in the rubble for their buddies, trying to hope to save the few who were still alive. And there's a famous clip, and this goes to every little data point about Building 7 is bullshit, all of it. And one of them is that Larry Silverstein said, pull it. But if you watch the actual interview of what he's saying in context, he's not talking about the building, and that's not a term for demolish a building with explosives anyway. It never was. And who the hell is the leaseholder on the building to order it to be demolished in the middle of the biggest terrorist crime scene event thing? He has no authority to do that anyway. He wouldn't. And what's he talking about? He's on the phone with the fire chief. Is the fire chief in charge of blowing up the building for the CIA now? I guess he's in on it. No, he's talking to the fire chief. And what are they talking about? They sent a team. That's a noun. They sent a team of men to go and inspect the building and decide what are we going to do. And they reported back, this thing is a total loss. It's burning out of control. We have no resources to do a thing about it. And so he said, well, I guess we better just pull it then. The team, pull them back, pull them away. We're not doing anything about the building. That's the entire conversation here. Nobody's talking about blowing anything up. They're just not. Then if anyone here has male parts, and I'm sure some of you ladies too, you must have all seen them blow up hotels in Las Vegas to build a new one on top of where the old one was. As if you have Fox TV and you were alive in the 1990s, you've seen it 1,000 times. And what do you always see? Pow, 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 pow. And it's all organized and well-timed in different places to make sure the building implodes just right. You don't see that in Building 7 anywhere. And David Ray Griffin tried to say you do, but that's because he was running some 240p footage. You look at the footage, there are not bombs going off anywhere in that thing. And instead, what you have is, I have transcripts. Well, first of all, I have tons of footage of the building burning out of control, like at high levels all day. But I also have transcripts of the firefighters from their debriefings from that day and the next day saying, we knew the building was going to fall. Me and Jimmy, we were in the bank building next door, and we said, man, it's making all this loud noise, and it's creaking, and it's heavily damaged. And I got on the phone to the chief, and I said, you better pull everybody back. This thing is going to fall. And then they all said that over and over again all day long. They knew that this building was a lost cause and was in danger of collapse. Pull everybody back. No one in any of this, is there any indication of the slightest hint of a whiff of a belief or an understanding or anything near a penumbra of a goddamn thing about setting off demolition charges in the thing? The building is damaged, heavily damaged and burning out of control, and we're afraid it's going to fall down. That's what they all said, which brings me to the BBC bullshit. And listen, it's G. Edward Griffin, the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, leader of the John Birch Society for like 40 years, one of the most important conspiracists in all of American history, and a guy I truly respect. If you've read Jekyll Island, he's a good man, and he's done a lot of good in the world. But even G. Edward Griffin debunked that shit immediately. You know how he did it? He went and he looked at the news wires and he goes, oh, look, the AP and Reuters and ABC and CBS and NBC and everybody else reported that Building 7 is about to fall down. They're afraid it's going to fall because it's so structurally unsound. It's been damaged and it's burning all day. And so they're telling everyone it's going to fall. BBC got it wrong because it was just the telephone game. And you could see in the clip, the lady arrives, she puts a thing in her ear, and the guy tells her, okay, say this, the building's about to fall down, or whatever he told her. And she goes, the building just fell down. But she doesn't fucking know anything. She just got there, and she's miles away. And then what's the better alternative explanation? That the CIA gave the whole script, or better, the Mossad, right? Gave the whole script for the day of 9/11 to the BBC, but the lady just read ahead on the script a little bit. Is that the implication? Or does anyone have a better implication of what that's supposed to mean? That she announced it before it fell? Other than, have you ever played the telephone game? Purple Monkey Dishwasher? Right? This is nothing. It's nothing. And Ed Griffin goes, you know how you know it's nothing? They all reported at the same time the building's about to fall, except the one lady who flubbed it. Big fucking deal. Amounts to absolutely nothing. Right. And then this is the same thing then with the Pentagon. Oh, a missile hit the Pentagon. How come there's no wreckage on the lawn of the Pentagon? Well, first of all, there was some, but second of all, it crashed into the building. You don't ask how come there's not wreckage all over the front lawn of the World Trade Center, because the plane went inside the fucking thing. That's why it crashed into the building. If they'd crashed on the lawn, it would have been all over the fucking lawn. They did the same thing. In fact, I'll get back to the Pentagon in one second. In Pennsylvania, they had the quote from the coroner going, damn, you can hardly see the plane at all. It's like nothing even happened here. But like, he wasn't swearing to God that nothing happened here. It was like a figure of speech, because what had happened was the plane had gone straight into the ground. It's relatively soft, dirt, I guess, and had dug itself a nice crater. Now, 9,000 times out of 10, 999, whatever the fuck's out of whatever, any pilot is trying to land safely. Nobody kamikazes straight in the goddamn ground. So every plane crash you've ever seen, yeah, the guy skidded on his belly and the thing came apart and it was sad. And yeah, in this case, but then they go, no, oh my God, there was no plane in the field in Pennsylvania. This is the exact same echo chamber, cottage industry of conspiracism of that time, in real time, what they were concluding. There was no plane in the field in Pennsylvania. It was all just somebody blew up something, and what happened to the plane full of people, nobody knows, but we don't have to care about that. But it was anything but. Hijackers got in a fight with civilians and then crashed. Couldn't have been that. Absolutely not, because that's what they said, so we know they're lying. And then on the Pentagon, when I talked about the Saudi intelligence guys earlier, this is the thing about it. I happen to know Greg Palast, the BBC reporter. You got to know him. He told me the story. He knows that the guy who invented the missile hit the Pentagon theory was a con artist. And it was a joke in the first place. The guy's name is Thierry Messian. And he made this thing, whoa, the missing plane or something. And Greg Palast asked him, man, why do you do this? You're just confusing the issue so bad, And he goes, ha, 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 this is how I separate money from the American people that they might otherwise spend in ways harmful to themselves, ha, 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 and drank his red wine. Right, so the whole thing was a hoax, but then Dave Von Kleist and I shouldn't have named any names, a bunch of these guys oh my God, guess what, guys? There wasn't even a plane at the Pentagon at all. And that's what we all believe now, because we're all part of this, social group together, and this is the thing that we all repeat. And then that was it. But guess what? That's the whole goddamn key to 9/11, is the guys that were on Flight 77 that they drove straight into the fucking Pentagon. They were the ones who were closest to Saudi intelligence. They were the ones that were at the Malaysia meeting where they planned the bombing of the USS Cole and where they planned September 11th. They were the ones that the CIA followed them, and not even just assets, but literal CIA officers. Fucking watched them go from Malaysia to Bangkok to fucking LAX, where then they moved in with a Saudi intelligence officer in San Diego. Nuh-uh. It was a missile. Donald Rumsfeld shot a missile at the Pentagon while he was sitting in the motherfucker. And if you don't think that, then you're a square and a stooge and a dork, and you don't realize the real deep truth, dude, about the inside job of 9/11. Meanwhile, what's it all about? The fucking Flight 93? There's no conspiracy there. There's a fucking plane wreck there. The same coroner who was like, God, it's like there's not even a plane wreck, also said, oh my God, look at all this DNA of all the dead people we found, and the seats, and the wreckage, and the landing gear, and the fucking everything. No conspiracy there. Oh my God, all the bombs in the towers. That means that it's not planes. It couldn't be just al-Qaeda hijackers, whoever helped them. It couldn't be al-Qaeda hijackers crashed the planes into the buildings. In fact, the planes even had missiles that shot into the towers right before they crashed for a few years before they dropped that one. Shit, for 10 years before they dropped that one. Nothing there. And then, oh, but what about Building 7? What about Building 7? It was hit by the North Tower, burned all day. Everybody knew it was going to fall. It fell. There's no indication of bombs anywhere. And suspiciously, for the narrative here, there's no motive to blow up Building 7, is there? Why would anybody blow up Building 7? And that's why nobody ever says anything other than, well, what about it? Well, what fucking about it? Nothing. Fucking nothing. That's what about it. That's all they ever fucking say. Like, oh, I bet you can't explain that one away. Yeah, I fucking can. This is stupid bullshit. It was hit by the North Tower. It burned all fucking day. They go, oh my God, the bad building's gonna fucking fall. And then it fucking fell. You have no need for a single explosive charge in your narrative of how to explain that day's events of those buildings. And then the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld shot a missile at the Pentagon. And then another guy said, no, he flew a Global Hawk drone into it. And then another guy said, no, it was an A-64 Skyhawk. We're just making up bullshit here, right? It was Flight 77, full of a bunch of fucking innocent people. And including, there was this lady who was famous, who was married to the Solicitor General at the time. She was like the counterpart to Ann Coulter. Sarah, help me. Anyone? Sarah, she was just like Ann Coulter. Pretty blonde, right-wing hawk on Fox News lady. Sarah Olson. And she died in that thing. And the truthers went off on this bullshit about how she's secretly still alive, hiding in Europe and all this shit. Because it has to be a bunch of made-up shit to make the rest of the made-up shit sound true. Otherwise, where the fuck is Sarah Olson?
All right,
she decided to just go along with this and hang up her fucking $1 million a year salary talking shit on Fox News in order to help the New World Order get away with their lie that she fucking died that day. They scraped her up with a fucking Q-tip. And you can look at Google Images and see landing gear and fucking engine parts and all kinds of shit from the Pentagon. It's fucking all of it. Now you see how, wait, going back, just to wrap up now. My point was, you had this pre-existing cottage industry of conspiracism, and this was their fucking big chance. But it was all wrong. And they all told each other, oh my God, you're so smart. You think that too? I also agree with that. And so now we know that we're so smart. And then very quickly, it just became like a social thing. If you're into fucking punk rock, then you know that shit was an inside job. What about Building 7 and all that shit? You're not like one of those fucking idiots who just believes everything they tell you. And then, or you're just afraid to admit the truth. I know you secretly agree with me, but you just don't have the courage. You have your giant profits at your nonprofit institute to fucking keep in mind. And fucking whatever, dude.
All right.
That's it. It was all bullshit. You know what it really was? It was Israel murdering Lebanese kids with your money on your government's authority. That was what brought down Building 7.
All right. All bullshit. Are you guys, I'm gauging the crowd. Are you guys on board for one more conspiracy debunking? Yeah? Okay. We'll do one more, and then we're going to have to do a part 2 down the line because I had more on the list. And listen, I'm going to pose, it's a 2-part question, and then I'll let you rant away. And I say that as if you needed my permission or I was going to say anything. But, all right, let's go with, and 2-part question. First is, your best theory on Epstein, if he was a Mossad agent or what the guy was doing, why he got the favorable plea deal in the works. And then the second part of the question is to what extent the elites are actually involved or seem to enjoy pedophilia, or perhaps are in touch with demon entities and seem to, be tapping into some other energy or appeasing some other god. So we're going to go from the full range of just simple Epstein, was he a government agent, to how rampant is the pedophilia amongst the elites? And if it is rampant, is there some sort of bigger agenda there because they worship some evil demon god?
Shit. Well, I mean, I assume that the guy was Mossad. If the best case for this that I know of is Daryl Cooper's great podcast, Martyr Made, where he did this huge thing. Yeah, let's hear for Daryl.
You guys are going to clap for an anti-Semite?
Oh.
I'm kidding. I'm here for an occasional joke.
I'll fight you. No, so he did a big thing on it.
Would someone be willing to bring me a beer? I feel like it's going to go for a minute.
Ryan Dawson.
Thank you.
Ryan Dawson has been on this for a very long time, of course.
Perfect. Thank you.
Look, I guess and I'm not the expert on this, but my understanding, basically, the case for him being Mossad is, first of all, his chick was the daughter of a very famous Mossad officer, a career
that's
Mossad
delicious.
officer.
Thank you.
It turns out it was Tony Blinken's stepdad was the last one who saw him alive. Isn't that weird? Before he fell off a boat. You know how that happens sometimes when people just fall off boats. Powerful.
That's why I don't go on them.
Yeah. And then also he was very closely connected to Lex Wexner, who's a powerful entrepreneur guy, and supposedly was very closely connected to Israel as well. And then this goes to the way you phrased the question. I think it was right, which was something about like how to get all this money and like whatever. And the idea, the cover story was he was a financial manager for billionaires. But the thing is, the actual financial manager for billionaire community in the world is pretty tight knit, and they all know each other's names, and they know whose fortunes their colleagues are managing and things to a degree, right? And nobody ever heard of this guy. This guy doesn't manage billionaires' fortunes. And that's not where he's taking his cut from. So then the next most plausible answer is, well, what he's doing is he's getting them laid and then he's blackmailing them. And so the most obvious thing there is, I've never been to a Diddy party. I don't know. But it seems like the most obvious thing is you get them a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old who looks a bit older, in right makeup and the right lights, and then the next morning you tell them, I got you, and now you're ours from now on. And I think, because come on, most businessmen and bankers and politicians aren't into raping helpless children. You know what I mean? You got to be a particularly sick fuck of like whatever particular bent to be like that. But I think you can get somebody laid by a pretty young girl, and then it turns out that like, oh yeah, we trafficked her in from Ukraine, and now you're a fucking felon, and you know what I mean? Pretty easy to compromise somebody that way. And then, but how was he allowed to get away with this for I don't know how many years or decades? I think at least he was doing this all through the 90s and into the 2000s, and I think potentially in the 80s. I'd have to go back and look, but he was getting away with this for a very long time. And as you say, the prosecutor, Acosta, famously said, and nobody ever waterboarded this guy and made him elaborate, right? Like, what is the rest of this story here? But he was told, he never said by who, to go easy on this guy. He belongs to intelligence. Now, on the face of it, that just sounds like he belongs to CIA, right? He belongs to the agency, which is perfectly possible. I think the Mossad connections are apparent. But it's funny. I was on a debate with on the Piers Morgan show with the Dershowitz. The Dersh was on there. And Dershowitz is like, he didn't even know anybody in Israel. When he wanted to host a dinner party with some fancy Israelis, I had to arrange the whole damn thing for him because he didn't know nothing about it. And he was, that was not his thing. So like, I don't know. Dershowitz lies a lot, but like, sometimes he's pretty transparent. He seemed to be like, he goes, dude, if Jeffrey Epstein was Mossad, he would have told me. You know what I mean? That was like the way he denied it. It was like, and then he goes, and I would have used that in his defense. So, I don't know. I don't know. But I do think it's suspicious that Janet Reno's Justice Department did nothing about this guy for 8 long years. And the rest of the thing. And then here's the other thing is, I mean, I know about this stuff, so I heard it somewhere. But more often than not, it seems like they exclude the house in New York. They exclude the ranch out in New Mexico. And they talk only about the island in the Virgin Islands there. When he had this huge ranch with this massive mansion way out there, like in the middle of nowhere on a huge property out in New Mexico. I know Bill Richardson, who had been the ambassador to the UN and the Secretary of Energy, was a big visitor out there. And then I believe that the testimony of the FBI, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, wasn't it the FBI had said that when they raided the mansion in New York, which was like given to him and was $1 zillion thing. It was like one of the most expensive fancy pantsest pieces of real estate in all of Manhattan, which was gifted to him by I forgot which billionaire, or at least like let him live there rent free kind of thing. And that they say the whole place was wired for video and sound, and that they got it all. And now, in the new administration, I've heard a lot of people say, like, oh, nothing's happening on that. They lied to us again and whatever. But I saw a report that didn't seem to, and I'm sorry, I can't remember my footnote, but I saw something that was in just regular news. It was not, I don't think it was like anyone with an opinion citing it. I think it was just kind of a regular news thing that said that the Justice Department is reviewing thousands of videos now
I thought they claimed
to decide
that they lost,
what they could.
I thought they said that they lost that
That's
safe.
what I thought too. That's what I thought too. But see, I had only heard that. But I'm just telling you what I read the other day was said that they're reviewing these videos now to determine what they want to release. And I think, this is the obvious
Just
thing.
the Clinton video?
He's trafficking children to somebody. And then who? And then you look at, there's footage of him with Prince Andrew. There's footage of him with Ehud Barak. There's, we know that he was palling around with Bill Gates. Do you guys ever see the thing where they asked Bill Gates about it? And he other than a State Department spokesman, I ain't never seen anybody stutter like this. Oh my God, don't, oh man. And he just had, that guy got me laid a bunch of times and I'm terrified of the consequences written all over his face, dude. That and then, so now to your real question about on the real sick level, I guess it seems like, I don't know, the chicken and the egg thing. Seems like maybe pedophiles get jobs in government because they know if they're a judge, they're going to be right in there. You know what I mean? They kind of seek those positions of power in the first place so they can kind of protect each other and traffic children to each other and however they do their networks and things. That it would make sense, and since that's the highest crime, that they would want to go ahead and get to the top of the police and do what they can, to control the state itself if they can. Then there's the thing. See, I don't know. I forgot. There's a comedian who said this who I'm
Sam Tripoli?
agreeing with. I forgot who said it. But it was just I don't understand how anyone, they say oh, once you're that powerful, then you got to keep crossing lines until you're doing crazier shit to get off and whatever. But I don't know, man. I can't imagine all the power in the world, how just a regular person with adult sexual tastes is going to now find it fun to hurt a little fucking kid. No matter how much power you have, you're the CEO of whatever the fuck. You know what I mean? When they go, Bill Clinton is a face-biting rapist, you know that shit's true. But if they said that about George Bush Jr., come on. I doubt he's probably ever cheated on his wife. I doubt sincerely that he would hurt a kid. He'll fucking bomb the shit out of them, but hold one down and fuck him? George W. Bush? I do not think so. And I, you know what I mean? I could see. And even Bill Clinton, I don't know if he would go after a child, you know what I mean? A teenager, sure. Bill Clinton, hey, that depends on what the definition of a teenager is, But, so then, your next line on the question sort of, I think, assumed the truth of something that I really don't know, and I tend to doubt, which is that there's a severe and incredibly ingrained cult of child molestation in powerful circles in America where like this is how you get made in the federal government, or this is how you get made in big business in America. There's one Illuminati and there's only one way in, and this is, I just don't believe that shit. It just doesn't seem right to me. There's too many fucking billionaires,
All right.
too many powerful people, too much power is spread out among too many people. But then again, like you see that weird shit where like all those powerful people all got a black eye. I was like, what the fuck is that? Like, there's some weird shit going on there. I don't know if that's Skull and Bones or, you know, what exactly they're doing.
Hanging
that
out with
doesn't
Macron's
necessarily-
wife.
But still, but like,
That was Elon Musk's joke.
Oh,
I
that's
just ripped
good.
off Elon Musk.
yeah, Macron's husband. Did you see that shit?
Oh yeah. All right, let's call it here. Round of applause for
That
Scott
wasn't your
Horton
next conspiracy?
making it happen. And to close out the show, thank you, the Skeptical Shaman, for hosting us tonight. You guys can check out all the Totem products. Do I have it right? Check out the Totem products. Thank you so much for hanging out. Round of applause. That's the end of the episode. Thank you.